Okay, I hit record and I am here with David Morris, my friend. I can call you my friend. We're friends.
Sure.
Um, I'm calling you can't say no now because I said it on air. Um, and so David, you are an agent and a small publisher, and I this is what we call a grand rounds interview for the Dialogue Doctor, where we're pulling in an expert to kind of get your take on the world. So
Sure.
I want to
Yeah.
say up front to everybody listening, you are not speaking for all agents. You're not speaking for all publishers. We're just
So
talking about
true.
your take on the world,
Yes.
right? Like we could get
Yeah.
somebody else out here tomorrow that's like, no, I completely disagree. This is what I do. So,
Yeah.
but this is also kind of a window for writers into um, somebody who's in the industry who's working really hard and doing good things and kind of how you see stuff. So let's talk about let's start with like your history in publishing. When did you get started in publishing? When was that how's that journey kick off for you?
Yeah. For me, it was it definitely was the accidental profession, something I did not plan on. I was a grad student in religious studies, not theology, but like psychology of religion, sociology of religion. So I'm a reductionist. I'll just say that.
Nice.
You know, Nothing about enchantment. I know you have a lot of fiction writers, I
Yeah,
don't understand art at all, but I'm self-aware. I'm
I love it.
self-aware.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's the
That's one
important
thing.
part. Yeah.
That's the one thing I learned, yeah, in studying religion actually, is how evangelicals aren't very good at art most of the time. So anyway, all right, got that in. But so I wound up in a political science textbook publisher, believe it or not, to pay the bills during grad
Oh,
school.
I didn't know
Yeah.
that.
And that was all about course adoptions, sending out free books to professors so they would adopt books. And I was stuffing envelopes, I was doing
Interesting.
that.
That's
I
just
built
like
I
cold calling professors of like, this is the textbook you need this week.
Yeah, yeah, my boss kind of did that part, but I got the books out and I designed the first website when HTML2 came along too.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
great. Yeah.
25-year-old kid figuring things
Man.
out at a small publisher. And then when I realized I wasn't going to get a job so easily in academia, I said, well, let me try this publishing thing. And I wound up working for a magazine-based publisher in New York City.
Okay.
So I lived in suburban New Jersey, commuted in on the train every day. It was an inspirational publisher,
Nice.
which is kind of a generic word for it was Guidepost magazines, like true first person stories. It's like
Hmm.
Reader's Digest religion is what it is.
Yep.
And
My mom used to get
yep,
guideposts and I would read it every month.
yep.
Yeah.
First
Yep.
person true stories of the way
Hmm.
God moves in our lives. That
Yep.
kind of, yeah.
Yeah.
So I was working for my grandmother.
Okay.
But so the magazine generated a large mailing list
Okay.
of subscribers. And so we had, I mean, at one time they had as many as 4 million paid
Mm,
subscribers, like one of the biggest magazine circulations in the country. But
man.
you didn't see it on newsstands because they didn't market it that way.
Yeah. Yeah. Sent
Um,
directly to your house.
yeah, so
Yeah.
I worked for the books team, and we would send out like a million mailing pieces
Hmm.
to a select group on that larger list. And we'd get a 2% response, which, having spent time in this business now, I know exactly what that means. 20,000 books right
Yeah.
there, just like that.
That's crazy.
2% of a million is 20,000.
Yeah.
And that's sort of the formula. And I learned how to market and write descriptive copy. It was as much a marketing job as it was editing. A lot of it was acquiring books to repackage and sell to
Mm,
this captive audience across the Midwest and the South.
yeah.
Um, and a lot of chicken soup type books and even
Yeah.
some fiction. Actually, I actually edited series fiction. I don't know if you know
No
this
way.
about me, Jeff.
I didn't
Yeah.
know this.
Yeah, yeah. For a while, I actually helped found the program at Guidepost for doing what we called continuity series fiction. We
Okay.
had this model called continuity series where you ship a new book every 6 weeks
Yeah.
along a topic. And we finally figured out how to make it work. And then it became like the mainstay cash driving program for one of them for our book division there, where we would send out a new novel every 6 weeks, which meant I had at any one time like six authors all working on the
Wow.
next book. I had a spreadsheet that spelled the whole production schedule out for each
Nice.
book, and we had to keep it on a clockwork type
Yeah. Yeah.
production. I helped manage one of the series Bibles, so the characters all stayed in
That's very
character, and
cool.
the settings all stayed in character. Um, I even went to the San Juan Islands once to do research on the one of the settings for one of the series. It
I
was
mean,
called it was called Mysteries of Sparrow Island, so like cozy mysteries and so on.
that's super fun.
Yeah,
And
there's so yeah.
that title, so as somebody who was reading in this world, probably when you were doing that as like a teenager, that title actually really sounds familiar. I
Yeah,
wondered if
yeah,
I read that.
yeah,
Mysteries of, yeah, anyway.
yeah.
Yeah.
To this day, one of my coworkers who actually worked under me there at Guidepost still writes books for them at a handsome fee.
Wow.
It's an amazing, and she gets one of those books to write is probably almost as much as they'll give them to her.
Huh.
So, how
That's
fast,
so
I think we
interesting.
gave people like 4 months to write a 60,000 word novel.
Yeah, that's nothing nowadays.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
people cranking out novels a
And
week.
yeah.
That's
And and mind you, that's if you know the Bible and you know the setting and you know the kinds of stories.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So I
talk
did
about
that.
writing to genre. That's
Yeah,
yeah.
exactly.
Well,
So fast forward, I did that for 17 years working in Midtown Manhattan. And then I became the director of that program, but eventually I was asked to be publisher over one of the leading religious publishing companies in the United States,
mhm,
Zondervan Publishing,
mhm,
based in Grand Rapids, Michigan, where I live now. Um, and so in 2013, I came out here and I went from being kind of like a book repackager and licensing person slash marketing person to being a full-on nonfiction, imprint publisher.
mhm,
So doing like, $1 million book deals
mhm.
and
Yeah.
the big, religious author personalities,
Hmm.
pastors of large churches, online influencers who are mostly women finding success there because a lot of women aren't allowed to be pastors in
Yeah,
certain
yeah,
religious worlds.
yeah.
So, but that's where they found their voices. In fact, that's a little story about religious publishing no one really talks about, and that is how women around 2015 or so, they kind of took over religious publishing
Interesting.
because they found each other online and they found their voices. And
Yeah.
that's when the world shifted to online retail. And I,
Yeah.
I, I would have pastors with like big egos and major churches, and I would go to them and say, these women they're out hustling you, you know.
Yeah.
And I didn't mean that in a sexist way. But I was trying to push them a little bit, but it was just
Yeah.
like talking to a wall half the
Yeah.
time.
And that's like that. It comes to mind like the Jen Hatmakers and like the Rachel Held Evans and
Exactly.
yeah,
Exactly.
they
Lisa.
all started with blogs
Yeah.
and then moved into like book and
Yep.
influencer space. Yeah.
Yep. Yep.
Yeah.
I learned a lot in my years in publishing. Well, let me just sort of put a period on that. Um, I did that through 2020 when they moved my job to Nashville. The backstory to that is that Zondervan is owned by HarperCollins. So I was a HarperCollins employee with a HarperCollins email address.
Mm-hmm.
So I kind of knew that whole system. I'd met Brian Murray, the president and CEO of HarperCollins. I almost ended up in a room with Rupert Murdoch, by the way, at one point,
Wow.
but my flight got canceled and couldn't get there during the winter or something like
Wow.
that. Um, yeah, people don't realize this, but Rupert Murdoch, I don't know that he's like still the CEO. I think one of his sons is in charge now, but they're like the biggest Bible publisher in the country.
No, I had no
Yeah,
idea.
yeah,
That's
yeah,
wild. Okay. I'm
yeah.
gonna store that
Anyway,
fact away in the back of my brain for a
yeah,
while.
and that's where a lot of the publishing money is actually, believe it or
Mm.
not. Whether you're talking
In
about broad
publishing
market or
Bibles.
yeah, broad
Yeah.
market or general market, that's one of the biggest, financial publishing markets that,
Yeah,
that you
man.
can find. Um, so yeah, so Harper owns Zondervan, and then they bought the other really big evangelical house called Thomas Nelson, which is based in Nashville. They put the Nashville executive team in charge, to
Okay.
speak in shorthand. And that just kind of changed things, but it's really more of a consolidation story.
Yeah, yeah.
And they moved my position to Nashville eventually. There's no Zondervan building really in Grand Rapids anymore, which
Mhm.
most people don't really quite can't get their heads around because it's such an institution here.
Yeah.
It's this old like Dutch immigrants, Dutch
Yeah.
Reformed people.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's not my background, but
Yeah, yeah.
we all kind of
History of
mix
the
in.
company. Yeah.
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 Um, So now I'm out on my own now doing hybrid publishing through Lake Drive Books.
Okay.
We're on our 15th title, almost 2 years since the first book came out. And I also do agenting with Hyponymous Literary, hyponymous.com. You can put that in the show notes. I won't try to spell it right now because I mess it up myself sometimes. But
Yeah,
and I
I
love
actually
doing,
have it open so I can spell it. It's
there you go.
Hyponymus.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yes. And I actually enjoy doing both because it allows me to really be focused on a certain, type of certain topics and certain authors.
Hmm.
So I mean, there's so much change going on in the American religious landscape right now. And what I want to do is acknowledge that with the books that I'm working on. I want to work with authors who acknowledge that, and they're trying to embrace that change and help people find their way. People are leaving religious communities statistically like never before
Hmm.
for a lot of different reasons, a lot of good reasons. And yet they come out going, "Who am I now? What do I do for spiritual, grounding?" Um, and sometimes, honestly, a lot of the message is really just stop worrying about it so much and be
Yeah.
yourself.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so that's a lot of the books have themes of wholeness in them, believe it or not.
Yeah.
Uh, and
Yeah.
uh,
That's beautiful.
and so that's what I do. Just put out a book called Baptist Land by a clergy sexual abuse survivor, Krista
Hmm.
Brown, who turned into an advocate. She's got a great Twitter following, been in the media a lot, and that book has been a really successful launch. It was out 2 weeks ago, yesterday.
Hmm.
We're talking here in mid-May, so
Yeah.
um, yeah, yeah. So that's what keeps me busy. That's my
That's great.
hopefully not too long-winded intro.
No, that's awesome. So talk to me about, I want to explore like the different aspects of what you do specifically from like, so the authors in our community kind of learn your perspective on what you're looking for when you interact with an author, that kind of stuff. Let's start with the hybrid publishing. There's a lot of terms, like I know what you mean. There's a lot of terms that get thrown around. Would you mind defining that for like, what do you mean when you say like Drive Books is a hybrid publisher?
Yeah, it's a term that's gotten a lot of currency lately.
Mhm.
Um, it's basically pay money up front to get your publishing going. But I think that what's different about it is that it is known for having real distribution,
Mhm.
um, and that it is known for real curation and real editing and design. You can go with a self-publishing house and it's just sort of like assembly line publishing. It's lucky to get edited well. It's not
Yeah.
curated well.
And that's like a, I give you, I pay you, I send you my manuscript. I'm giving you
Right.
like, I'm covering the whole cost. I'm pretty much hiring a house of contractors that are all packaged together and they're
Yeah,
going to
that
work
would
on my
be
book.
self or vanity publishing.
Yeah, that's the like, and
Yeah.
they aren't absorbing any of the cost of publishing. I'm absorbing, as the author, I'm absorbing everything. Like this is,
Yeah.
I'm paying for
Yeah.
the editor, I'm paying for the book cover, I'm
Yeah.
paying for that. Yeah.
And honestly, by definition, the hybrid publishing model is not any different.
Okay.
It's really, I think, I mean, you can go to the Independent Book Publishers Association and look up their criteria for hybrid publishers,
Hmm.
but you also have to know that the hybrid publishers out there range from, what they're really providing you. And there are hybrid publishers that will charge $10,000 for the upfront costs for producing a book. I saw a quote recently where it was over $40,000. I could not believe it.
Wow.
And I struggled a little bit with that, honestly, because it bothers me that there's hybrid publishers out there pitching services in that way, because you know what it takes to sell books and to recoup 40 some thousand dollars is
That's huge. Yeah.
that's a lot of books.
Yeah.
And that, and just whether I'm agenting or doing small publishing or even working for a major publisher, that's a lot of books to have
Mhm.
to sell
Yeah.
to recoup your money. And it just feels a little bit like, man, I don't know if the emphasis is right here. So you got to be careful no matter what you do. I would never pay a ton of money at Lake Drive Books. My philosophy is to basically pass along at cost costs.
Hmm.
So, I personally handle the macro or developmental edit, which is the biggest cost,
Yeah.
typically. And then there are things like copy editing and typesetting and interior and cover design
Hmm.
and proofreading, two passes. So it's a full traditional publishing, book production treatment.
Yeah.
And I get that done for a lot less. And, and my philosophy is I'm not trying to make money on the upfront part of the book. I want to make money on the back end of the book. So I'm invested in terms of my time and my expertise.
Mm.
And, I think that it's a very doable model if publishers can get rid of so much of the overhead that they have.
Yeah.
So I call it traditional publishing with an untraditional financial model.
Gotcha.
But I also bring to that um, a focus on author platforming,
Hmm.
because publishers today they rely on author platforms more than they care to admit. I mean,
Talk talk
the
to me
whole
a little
thing
bit about what that means. Like, what do you
just
mean when you say
shifted.
author platforming?
Yeah, I kind of have to go backwards a little bit on that. Just like back in time, we lost in the United States and the world in general, we lost bookstores as a significant market share in book sales. Um, there used to be that if you wanted a book 20, 25 years ago, you'd have to go to a bookstore. If they didn't have it,
Hmm.
you had to order it, or you have to go to another bookstore. Um, Nowadays, you can get a book ordered online and have it, the next day.
Yeah.
Um, and so, like even in the religious publishing business, there are these things we call Christian bookstores,
Hmm.
and we had 8,000 of them in the early 2000s, and there's less than 1,000 today. And for a major, and I'm speaking from my experience, for a major religious author, like a pastor with a giant church,
Yeah.
you know,
And that's like built-in sales. You're like,
yeah,
hey, you've got a
but
following of built-in sales.
well, there's that, yeah, but in terms of the broader retail channels where their books would sell, you'd be surprised. Christian bookstores nowadays account for way less than 5%
Wow.
of sales.
Mm.
It's all online, especially if it's like an author who's, at a junior level,
Mm. Gotcha.
because you just don't. I mean, even just the proposition of trying to get your book into a Barnes and Noble these days is kind of, things have changed. They're always saying something positive about Barnes and Noble, but its market share is still very small. They're still cherry picking just from there's
Mm.
the cream of the crop type
Yeah.
books.
Yeah.
I'm mixing metaphors now,
Yeah.
but um, and they have, what do they have? 650 stores maybe.
Hmm.
And, if you can get your book in there, maybe their individual stores, we've been told lately, they're allowing them to place their own orders instead of a national buyer, which is the way it
Hmm.
used to be. Um, but even then, that's a big sales job for a publisher. And even if you can get B&N to take 300 books, chances of a lot of those coming back are very high. So it's like,
Yeah.
what is the market share here for retailers?
Yeah.
So I got to get back to answering your question though.
No, this is great. It's really, this is
Why
all very
authors?
fascinating.
Yeah. So here's the thing. I say this a lot, uh, and I haven't yet figured out a way to like backtrack this. I feel like I'm pretty sure this is like really solid logic. Publishers used to rely on bookstores for as a marketing tool.
Hmm.
Forget about PR, forget about paid ads. Um, their main engine of discoverability was their exclusive relationship with the bookstores,
Hmm.
which had the exclusive relationship to the book buyers, the
Yeah.
book readers.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. So when all that went away, they no longer had this machine for
Yeah.
getting books into the marketplace. Think about it this way too. If you're a bookstore, to some extent, you want to have planned obsolescence of some of those titles.
Yeah.
You have limited shelf space,
Yep. You don't want to hold those forever. Yeah.
and you're going to want to have like the staple backlist books,
Hmm.
To Kill a Mockingbird. Everybody's always got to have a copy of something like that.
Yeah.
But then there's like front lists that are just constantly churning.
Hmm.
And that was like easy money for publishers and booksellers
Hmm.
back in the day. Nowadays, and you'll hear industry reps talk, or industry experts talk about this, like Mike Shatskin. I don't know if you've ever read the Mike
Mhm.
Shatskin blog. But he'll talk about how now publishers have actually retailers in the form of Amazon have unlimited shelf space.
Mm.
And backlist titles have become way more important than they ever were. You don't have to put them out of print because of POD.
Mm.
They're easy
Yeah.
to find because of the online retail space of Amazon.
Yeah.
And now it's much harder for publishers to be profitable with front list titles.
Mm.
So the publishing business it's just really radically changed. But back to author platforms.
Yeah.
So if you don't have the bookstores as a channel, the publishers are now exclusively looking at author platforms before they make a decision to acquire a book.
Mm.
You know, I was publisher over a team of editors and marketers, and we would have meetings with just the editors, when we're looking at proposals.
Mhm.
And I'm a words person. I have a PhD in religious studies. I'm not a finance person. I'm not a sales person. That's not how I came through this. I'm
Yeah.
not a marketing person. But the first thing I would look at is the Instagram following. Once I look at the title, I look what it's about. Yeah, it fits.
Yeah.
But okay, now before I go in reading a whole lot and getting to like this author a ton, I want to see it. And if it's 5,000 Instagram followers. Nope, sorry. This is not
Mm.
going to work.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
got to be at least 25 for our particular program.
Mm.
And you'll
Yeah.
have some publishers, like some of the major houses, and this isn't true for everything. I mean, obviously there's exceptions, but by and large, they're looking at the Instagram and TikTok followings
Mm.
a lot quicker than you might think. They're
Yeah.
skipping over a lot of things you put in that proposal and they're going right.
Going
And you
straight to
better
the end.
put your online following right there in the proposal. And that's what I do as an agent.
Yeah.
I make sure that it's right there because I know whether it's good or whether it's not good, you need
Yeah.
to get them that information quickly if you want to build any trust and any hope of them really digging into it.
Gotcha. I want to come back to that in a second, but let's pause for a second and talk about what a relationship, because you do both. Part of the reason I really wanted to talk to you about this is because you have a foot in both worlds, which I think is unique, that you're hybrid publishing and you're working as an agent. So we've talked about hybrid publishing, like the authors putting money in and the hybrid publishers bringing knowledge, distribution, expertise to help produce that book. What does it look like when an author partners with you as an agent?
Yeah, so I think that publishing works best when it's a long-term partnership
Okay.
type relationship.
Yeah.
And I think the best agents out there, as far as they can do it, because it's tough to make money as an agent too, um, are the ones who aren't just in it for, helping you find a publisher and brokering a deal.
Mm-hmm.
That agent really ought to be your sidekick and help and coach and mentor. I do a lot of that in my relationship with my authors, as much as they'll listen and as much as they have capacity to listen or interest.
Mm-hmm.
So the process of an agent is, let's talk about the idea that you've got going here. Then let's work on a proposal together. The first thing is to make sure, for nonfiction anyway, that you've got a good, chapter outline with descriptions of each of the chapters. And I like to ask for 2 sample chapters. One would be the intro, like a beta version of your introduction, and then also a full-on sample chapter that shows the structure of what are you actually going to put in each chapter? How
Yeah.
does it begin? How does it end? Is it story driven? Is it research based? Is it a lot of expository commentary? What is it? So the the acquiring house can see what to expect. So we get the proposal done. As an agent, typically, I'm the one who puts the finishing touches on the proposal. I'm the one who makes sure it's formatted correctly and proofread. And I get the author to fill in a lot of the blanks, but I'm the one who puts it together because I'm representing them as my agency. Most agencies are, the masters of their own
Mm-hmm.
proposals that they send to publishers. So we get that in, and then you pitch it to however many publishers, the right kind of publishers, hopefully for that proposal. Hopefully you have meetings. Hopefully you get an offer after, it takes time, takes weeks and weeks sometimes.
Yeah.
And you get a contract and you negotiate terms as an agent. You negotiate the contract language here and there. And and then it, it really, it just keeps going after that. I mean,
Okay.
you, as an agent, you want to support the author. It's a long game publishing.
Yeah.
So, um, right away, I'm trying to coach the author up on like, how's the writing going? You know,
Hmm.
let's keep aware of the deadline. Do you feel like you're going to make the deadline? If not, let's talk to the publisher. Trying to have as much proactive communication as I can within reason. It's an email here and there
Yeah.
over that writing period time. Then once the manuscript is in, making sure all that kind of goes smoothly. I don't get in the way of the author editor relationship, but I
Hmm.
ask to be copied like most agents do. Um, I think. And then once the book has been delivered, we're talking about the cover. And
Yeah.
once, and I'm involved in that, that's one of the hardest things in publishing actually is to get past that stage.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because
Seriously.
covers can just be so tricky and subjective.
So
And
everybody judges a book. Yeah.
yeah. And honestly, we often will over-engineer them and overthink them sometimes
Sure.
too. It
Yeah.
just, yeah. So I'll leave it at that. And then when it comes to the marketing phase, I definitely want to be involved.
Yeah.
Um, because I think authors don't realize enough just how much the publisher does and does not do.
Mm.
And there, the author is really the one who should take responsibility for what happens.
Yeah.
And I still see it today how authors are quick to blame publishers for the lack of success for a book. And I'm like, 9 times out of 10, oftentimes I hear, well, my editor changed or my marketer changed.
Hmm.
And I'll tell you, having run a marketing team, 9 times out of 10, that's not the main problem. There's
Yeah.
there's other things going on here.
Yeah. Yeah.
And and frankly, just a lot of books don't work. Publishing is a speculative business.
Yeah.
I heard Marcus Dole, the Random House publisher, say recently, it was actually in the Department of Justice investigation when they were trying to buy Simon and Schuster, and
Hmm.
all this testimony is actually, you can go find it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And someone put it all into a Substack post. I'm not going to
Hmm.
remember who it was, but um, they quoted Marcus Dole as saying 4% of our books pays for 60% of our business.
Hmm. Yeah.
4% pays for
Yeah.
60%.
Yeah. Yeah. Which means 96% is paying for less than 30. Like just to flip that, like,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
most of this isn't paying for much.
Yeah.
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 When you're as an agent, so I'm hearing you say that like as an agent, you view yourself not just as a like, hey, I'm selling this book to a publisher, but like as a mentor of an author and trying to build that long-term relationship of like, you and I are
Yeah.
going to be in this for a while. We're figuring out what a career here looks like.
Yeah.
What are you looking for in an author to represent?
Well, you mean, yeah, just like sort of the profile of an author, not the
Yeah.
topics or anything like that. But
Yeah. Like if an author's like, oh, I want to reach out for you to be my agent,
yeah.
what would you
Yeah.
want that author to have together before they? Does that
Yeah.
make sense? Because like I know when I was a
Yep.
first time
Oh
author, I
no,
was like,
I get it.
I've written half a book.
Yeah.
Agents, here I come. And like
Yeah.
it's like
Yeah.
they're like, no, don't talk to us yet. So like what is it? What are you looking for an author to pull together before they what are you looking for in an author that you want to represent?
I think a mindset of professionalism and humility,
Okay.
and that if you treat your writing as a professional job, um, that it's a profession.
Hmm.
It's something that isn't a hobby necessarily. It's a profession with standards and best practices and industry structure around it. So there's a lot to learn. You can't just be an electrician overnight. You've got to go through training.
Yeah.
You got to be on the job training.
Yeah.
Um, you know, I hear authors like will often consult with other authors and tell me their author friends' opinions about things. And I go and I look who these authors are, and I'm like, that person's only published one book. Why are you like, I've been in publishing 30 years. Why am I having to listen to this
Yeah.
opinion?
Yeah.
But there's so, I mean, and publishing is mysterious. I mean, I learn something about it every day, it seems to me. Um, but I think just the humility and a desire to learn and to see your content as something that, the book is more of an expression of your content, but it's not the only expression. So now I'm getting into the topic of like online platforming,
Yeah, yeah,
putting
yeah,
content out in other ways.
yeah.
Um, I think in today's world, it helps to think about it that way. Um, and
Helps to
and
think about it
I
as
think
the
probably in,
content you're putting out as an expression of
yeah,
the book. You're like your book is just an addition to the
right.
platform you're creating.
And that may or may not be more true for nonfiction authors that I work with, but I often say things like, look at social media, look at email newsletters as just a different medium
Hmm.
for putting out the same content.
Yeah,
Don't let everybody else define how you use it. You're
yeah.
an author, use it a certain way. And honestly, that's the best way to use it as an author. When I look at authors, social media following, I don't look at, I mean, if they're all they're doing is selfies, well, they're not really providing content.
Yeah.
If they're if they suddenly put a book out and they haven't acclimated their followers to, oh, this is a person who has expertise, they have knowledge,
Hmm.
they figured some things out, and they've been giving that to me in smaller bites online. Yeah, I want their book. I found that works
Gotcha.
for authors.
Yeah. So
Um,
there's like a need to just to summarize what I hear you saying is what you're looking for in an author you represent is somebody who is earning with readers the like respect of when you get a book out, I'm going to be interested in what it says
yeah,
because you've earned
yeah,
my attention over time.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
But again, back to that humility part, I think that if you can approach your relationship with your agent and with your publisher as complete partners,
Hmm.
no one's providing a service for each other. It's equal. you
Yeah.
know no one is at the service of the other necessarily. It's an equal partnership. I just think that's so important. I will also say too, when I hear authors getting cynical about publishers, I'll tell you the truth. It's hurtful.
Oh.
It can be hurtful to you. See, the
Yeah.
thing is, it's like we're people too behind the scenes.
Yeah.
And maybe we say things or we do things that don't cater to or don't show acknowledgement to something that's unique and special about one particular author.
Hmm.
And that's true. There are unique and special things about each and every author, but there's also something unique and special to our ability to aggregate everything.
Hmm.
And that's something I don't usually say this because I know my own authors might be hearing me say these things, and none of my authors say bad
None
things
of
about
them,
publishers.
nobody's listening to this. Don't
So
worry. Nobody's going to hear. I'm just kidding.
yeah, yeah, but
Yeah.
it's surprised me, and I think I'll be honest with you too, and you'll understand this, Jeff. Sometimes in the religious business, people are not as nice as they are normally.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
I've seen a lot of that. People not being
Yeah.
treated well, more
Yeah.
narcissism, more selfishness.
Lot of pursuit of power in the
Hmm.
religious business
Fast,
that
fast pursuit of
yeah
power.
that
Yeah,
taints everything.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Um okay, I'm just gonna throw some I put that I was interviewing you to the Dialogue Doctor community and they had some questions for you as a hybrid publisher and agent. Query letters, useful, not useful? Do you use them? Do you not use them?
Um, yeah, well, for me, that's usually an email, and yes, as opposed to what? Clarify a little.
Like authors spend a lot of time building query letters. Like it's a big thing of like getting those perfect and getting those right.
Oh,
um how much does that impact, like if an author cold queries you, what are their chances of actually getting your attention?
well, because I'm small, it's easy to get my attention, but if it's, sometimes I get ones that aren't customized. If it doesn't look like you've done your research
Okay.
and you don't put in the query letter a reason why it's a fit with
Mm,
with me as an agent or me as a publisher, um, pretty quickly I can tell you when you haven't done that work. And it's actually a little frustrating. Like I pitch to podcasts
Hmm.
and I will stop and look and see, does my author fit this podcast? And I will try to give a reason when I pitch to that podcast. It's not always true, but I try.
Yeah,
And
I'll
it's
admit here for a second. I get a lot of pitches to this podcast,
yeah,
and we're not even an interview podcast. Like I don't typically like I'm interviewing you, but it's very
yeah,
rare that I do an interview.
yeah.
And I get the weirdest of like, hey, I've listened to your podcast and I think this interview would be perfect for
It was a
you.
great fit.
He's an
Yeah.
entrepreneur, blah, 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 blah.
Yeah.
He started 5 companies. I'm like, what do you do? I'm a craft podcast. What are you talking about? Like,
Yeah.
like, who are you? Yeah. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
funny. And I know when I pitched a podcast of like, hey, I'd love to come on and be interviewed by you for whatever reason, I've usually listened to like 5 to 10 episodes. I don't pitch to people that I don't
Yeah.
know exactly what I'm walking into.
Yeah.
Anyway,
Yeah. But I would
that's
say
my own hobby horse.
I would say absolutely. I mean, I think most of publishing works on email. And if you can craft and think about it, no one wants to read a really long email.
Yeah.
So if you can craft a short email with a few bullet points, here's who I am, here's what I
Yeah.
do, here's my idea, and attached is and here's my platform,
Yeah.
and here's the audience I've developed.
Hmm.
Um, and then attached is my proposal. If you want to learn more, I'd love to tell you more.
Nice.
Um, Now, full proposal can feel kind of intimidating to a lot of authors, um, but I recommend that it's a really good exercise, whether you publish a book or not. It's a good exercise
Writing
to
a
put
book.
a book proposal together.
Yeah.
Yeah, it'll
Yeah.
help
Yeah.
you even with your own writing.
Yeah. I remember the first one I wrote. It actually really helped me with plotting. I was like, oh, I got to
Yep.
figure this crap out.
And also to
Yeah.
just help to understand what's the appeal here.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
think there's a dream of every author that their book is so good, the idea is so amazing that it will transcend their lack of platform.
Yeah, right, exactly.
Would you speak to that for a minute?
Yeah. Um, and I can understand that. I mean, that's part of the creative process. That's part of being human is feeling like what you've put together is something unique, and there is
Mhm.
probably uniqueness there. Um, I wish I could come up with a good analogy for it. Um, but maybe it's like being a sculptor, and when you're first starting out, you don't really, you can't really find that uniqueness so quickly.
Mm.
You got to give it time. Um, in the in my history, there were 3 books that came out on the same week on the topic of shame for women.
Hmm.
And they almost all had the same title too, Unashamed.
Nice.
Yeah.
Not confusing at all. Yeah.
So I think, and I don't want to sound cynical or crass, but I think that it is hard to say something that no one else has said, but you can say it in new ways. You can present it in different ways. You can be more effective at saying it.
Hmm.
Um, and I think actually that gets back to what I was talking about, humility. And yeah, there's something special about you and what you're saying and what you're writing. Um, but be humble in the process and be ready to take feedback.
Yeah.
Um, yeah,
That's a great note. I think that's actually a good, and I don't want to hold you past the time I told you I would, so I know I'm out,
no
we're going
problem.
up on time. So Hybrid Publishing, Lake Drive Books. Um, your agency is Hyponymus. Did I say that
Hyponymus.
wrong? Hyponymus.
Yeah.
I'll put links
Hyponymus
below
is
those.
an hyponym is a name for something that is a subset of something else.
Nice.
So it's actually something that's more specific. And that's kind of my philosophy at Hyponymus is find your specificity,
Yeah, yeah,
which isn't necessarily find your originality. It's find your specificity.
yeah, yeah. I like that.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, thanks so much for doing this. And I can say if anybody has listened to this is like, oh, I may want to try to work with David, I can say that you're great to work with.
Thank you.
Absolutely
So
fantastic.
are you.
Thanks, man. All right, I'm gonna turn this off and we can talk a little bit more.
Okay.